Today it's time for a best of 3 series of professional StarCraft 2, and what I've got for you is a Protoss versus Terran. Spawning here in game number 1 on Acropolis in the bottom right hand corner of the map. He's one of the legends of StarCraft 2. He recently announced that he is back as a pro gamer once again. I mean, if you watched professional SC2 back in like 2011 or so, 2015, you will 100% be familiar with this man's name. We're looking inside of the main base of MC. Now, I have absolutely no idea how good MC is right now, but basically back in the day, he won everything, okay? He won a GSO Code S, I think he won a couple actually, he won several of the WCS events as well. I remember him singing Let It Go during like a Home Story Cup. Which is one of my most memorable memories of MC. But long story short, he's a really fun player to watch. He hasn't been around for a couple years, recently decided to come back, and I guess we'll figure out together how good he is currently. His opponent in the opposite corner, with the blue Terran SCVs, also from South Korea, he goes by the name of Fantasy. Now, Fantasy, about a year or so ago, decided to come back to StarCraft 2 as well. He's one of the legends from StarCraft 1. I believe he won an OSL back in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, he's been a pro gamer for most of his life. I guess for pretty much all of his adult life, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. But yeah, he's been around for a very long time. He's definitely one of the stronger Terran players from South Korea. So we'll see where he is going to take it. If I were to make a guess right now, right? I think I would have to lean to Fantasy. I mean, Fantasy is a very solid, straightforward macro player. And generally speaking, he's going to be a player who you don't really get to cheese or all in very easily. That's one of the things that MC did quite a lot. I mean, he was a very good, well-rounded player, but he liked to do 2-base all-ins and at very least some aggressive pushes while making it look like macro initially. So we'll see where this series is going to take us. Very standard opener so far by both players. Nothing out of the ordinary. Both players also successfully scouting exactly what's going on. Now, apparently the probe does live. Just making sure here that there's no like proxy starport or anything going up here for his opponent. Obviously, you never really know exactly where Terrans are going to build their structures, but nothing all too crazy right here from Fantasy. He decided to go for the command center on the low ground after sending out the Reaper to watch the other side of the map as well. Stalker is coming out. That one should be able to ward away this very first Reaper, although, yeah, getting a probe kill or two, that would be really nice. It's one of those weird dynamics. Sometimes you want to send the Stalker forward, like for example MC did right here. Sometimes you want to send it to the main base, especially on one of the newer maps. This is one of the things that will just simply take a little bit of time. Now this Reaper, ooh, it didn't actually decide to go after that single probe. I think it could have maybe gotten the kill, but it is going to instead decide to go back home, while saving its life at the very least for right now. Twilight Council here coming up from MC. Now obviously one of the builds we've been seeing quite a lot lately is that Blink Stalker aggression. We'll have to see if MC decides to go for something along those lines as well. Blink Stalker obviously good at basically everything that Terran players can throw at you. In the earlier stages of the game anyway. They have this weird moment where they kind of drop off later on. I mean, they're obviously still good when it comes to like beating Liberators and whatnot later on into the game as well. Nice little bit of micro so far though by MC, trying to pick up as many of those Marines as he possibly can. It looks like he will be able to successfully kill every single last one of them. Widowmine though right now available, and well, with more Marines coming out, I think that eventually Fantasy should be okay. Whoa, that Stalker disappeared. Did you see that? I have no idea how that actually happened. So who wins in a fight right now? I guess it's the Reaper, man. I've had this weird bug over like the last couple of weeks, and I think this maybe has to do with like the new patch or something, but sometimes it seems like unit death animations don't work and they just literally disappear. I have no idea. Maybe I need to just go ahead and reinstall my game or something. But if you notice that, I guess that's something that is just on my computer, because I haven't really heard anyone else complain about that. Regardless, it is going to be a Dark Shrine follow-up right now for MC. So the timing right now on the Twilight Council wasn't the fastest. He could obviously still go ahead and get himself the Blink upgrade and then charge as well in just a little bit. Ooh, nice scout there actually. Fantasy getting the Reaper in right as that Warp Prism is leaving the main base of MC as well. The Prism obviously. Ooh, is he going to get another kill? Wow, he will. 3 kills right there in total, of which 1 was a Stalker. Very nicely done. See, once again, he disappeared. It's magic, dude. I've got a magic spell. Anyways, we see that Warp Prism moving across the map right now. A Raven is coming up, so Fantasy should be able to defend against the Dark Templar. A medevac though, coming up right now. There's 2 of those Widow memes in here, but yeah, more than enough Stalkers to deflect that. Good positioning right there by MC, who now has the Prism on the other side of the map. Dark Shrine did finish. There we go. And look at this timing though on the Raven. Beautiful work here by Fantasy. I think he should be able to defend this quite easily. Although, yeah, Ravens do take a little bit of time, I suppose, to finish up. There's also now a missile turret going up here at the front, so basically this is like Fantasy just double protecting himself, okay? He is not gonna really take too much damage here whatsoever. But the nice thing is, you can also morph these Dark Templar into Archons. No Dark Archons though, none of that. No mind controls here, although that would be pretty cool. Yeah, you can always go ahead and obviously morph them into Archons as well, and that will allow you to use them in the main army a little bit easier. Now, once again, it looks like that medevac has found a bit of a different angle. MC not responding so far, and there we go. 8 worker kills in just a blink of an eye. I think that MC was probably staring right here at the Warp Prism, trying to make sure that he could warp in a couple more Dark Templar to also morph them into Archons. It kind of looks like a Zerg versus Protoss build instead, right? Where Archon drops obviously are very, very popular. Vikings, though, easy to produce, obviously, for Terran, and once Stimpack finishes up, it's going to be very difficult to get anything done. Plus, we have the Interference Matrix right here on that Raven as well. That allows you to basically just pick up that Warp Prism much, much easier. So, Warp Prism Harass definitely still has potential. Always a bit of a risk, though. Obviously, though, these Widow Mines, right, they're going to come off cooldown. It looks like Fantasy is just simply, he's just simply going to hang it out right here next to the statue of Mengsk. And right next to, I guess, these umbrella-looking things over here, like a little lunch place. I wonder if he decides to go back in while MC is preoccupied here on the other side of the map. This is an army that is not really going to take a whole lot of damage though, right? Look at the amount of siege tanks and marines here available. I don't really think that Terran's going to be able to take any losses here. I mean, he could try and take more losses, I suppose. Prism right now going into the main base as well, trying to get a little bit of work done. And it's actually starting to hurt quite a bit. That was not a cancel right there on that command center. Rather than sending in the medevac into the main, apparently he has decided to just simply send it back home again as well. Little bit of damage right here being done. 8 SCVs went down, but really, I mean, considering the amount of damage that MC took, I don't think that really pays for itself. Right? I mean, the supply count's right now heavily in favor of Terran as well, at a point in the game where we usually see that being relatively even. Well, the 2 medevacs, or rather the 2 Widow Mines right there in that ship, looks like they're gonna be okay for the time being. But Fantasy just simply decides to sit back and play hyper defensively. Well, Archon's trying to get something done. Siege tank from a distance though, shelling away. And now with that Viking out, I think that Fantasy should be able to defend this relatively easy from here on out. Alrighty. So who's gonna end up taking a 3rd base first? It looks like we have arrived in the mid game right here. And I don't really see MC getting too much done. Now, I might be mistaken here, right? He does certainly still have a pretty menacing army. I guess for all intents and purposes, we could look at this and think that it's an all-in. The scan right there also confirms for Fantasy that there's no 3rd for his opponent just yet. He's going to continue making that wall right over here. Medevac once again making its way across the map this time around. It's filled with Marines. And I think this may very well force a bit of a move right here from MC. Yeah, he needs a lot more than just a couple of those zealots to warp in. A lot of probes are being picked off as well, and a lot of those reinforcing units are just gonna be, you know, they're just gonna be killed right when they get here. Now, nicely done there. He did manage to get the feedback, but apparently this is gonna force the recall on the entirety of that Protoss army, and there you go. If we could have a smug-looking medevac, it'd be this one right here. Fantasy essentially forcing back the entirety of that Protoss army with just a single medevac full of Marines. Really nicely done, and that obviously now allows Fantasy to break out of his base. Now remember, the 3rd command center right here at the front was killed earlier, so that was not a cancel, if I'm not mistaken. So Fantasy ended up losing quite a lot of resources there. Right as we see that the Terran player move out, once again, the Prism decides to get in. I don't think the Archons are really going to be able to you know, be picked off very easily here. But Fantasy now has more than enough units to both defend his main base while also pushing at the same time across the map. Once again, I like this, okay? Fantasy displaying a little bit of multitasking. Defending at home, dropping in his opponent's main base, and now pushing at the same time as well. This is going to be pretty annoying, though. Stalker's actually a little bit out of position. The siege tanks dealing a whole lot of damage. Now that Raven providing the high ground vision as well. A lot of these probes are being picked off with relative ease, and I think the amount of army here available for Fantasy might just be a little bit too much. The High Templar right now all killed. Siege tanks do still remain. Stalkers tried to blink on top of it as well, but in the meantime, right, even if this army gets cleaned up, I think that the economical damage that Fantasy has done is just simply a little bit too much, as the Marines and the Marauders are going to be able to pick up the last of these Protoss units, and Fantasy picks up a victory here in game number 1. Alrighty, game number 2 will take us to Cyber Forest. Now it's interesting though, why a lot of pro gamers from South Korea decided to return to SC2 over the last couple of years. I find Fantasy to be one of the most interesting subjects for this discussion. So Fantasy has been around in pro gaming for many years, right? Like I mentioned, he was very, very successful in StarCraft 1. However, after wrapping up his military service about a year or so ago, he decided to return to StarCraft 2, a game where he has been less successful than StarCraft 1. Now, I'm sure there's been interviews done with him, and I don't actually know the reason, but I'd be curious to know why he decided to go and do that. I mean, you'd imagine, right? You'd return to the game that you're more successful in. And especially for StarCraft 1. I mean, StarCraft 1 over in South Korea, which is where Fantasy is from, is more popular, even to this date, than StarCraft 2 ever has been. So it's an interesting thought process. I wonder if it's because, well, first off, I guess StarCraft 2 is a little bit easier on your hands than StarCraft 1. A lot of pro gamers get all kinds of wrist issues, especially once they get a little bit older. And with a little bit older, I mean like 25 years. Or above, right? It's a little bit ridiculous. But a lot of them do get wrist issues, and I guess Fantasy, I think he's like 27, 28 or so. You know, he's been around for a long time, and I guess he may have decided, you know what, if I want to do this for another 10 years, I might have to play StarCraft 2 because it's the quote-unquote easier game of the two. And maybe, and this is just speculation, right? But maybe it's also because the StarCraft 2 prize pools are significantly bigger than the StarCraft 1 ones. I don't really know if that's the case, but I wonder if that's the reason as well, actually, for MC. So MC, he did win tons of events. He was actually the first player to go over $500,000 in prize earnings. He was the very first one in that regard. However, he won a lot of events as well. There's been a bunch of pro gamers a couple years ago. Like, for example, Team Liquid's Teja, right? He won events left and right for a couple years. And it was like $5,000 at a time, $10,000 at a time, maybe $15,000 at a time. And obviously he won dozens, so he did very, very well for himself. But in the grand scheme of things, he hasn't really earned nearly as much as, like, say, for example, a Cerebral, who's been dominating for really only a couple of years right now, right? Really only like a year and a half or so, where he's really been extremely good. Nowadays, the prize pools for a lot of these events are just simply much, much bigger. I mean, for example, WESG recently had an event where the first place prize, which Innovation ended up winning, was $150,000. Obviously, we have the WCS Spring and the WCS Winter events so far. I think they were like $100,000 each as well. I believe BlizzCon at the end of 2018, how much was that? I think that was like don't quote me on this, but I think it was like $270,000 first place prize. Something along those lines. Prize pools are significantly bigger. And I wonder if maybe MC and Fantasy both decided, you know what? I'm going to try my luck and see if I can get good enough to take some of that sweet, sweet esports money. I mean, if you'd ask them directly, maybe MC would probably tell you if that's the case, but if you'd ask him directly, I guess they, you know, actually, MC is a very straightforward guy. Yeah, he'd probably just tell you. He'd probably just tell you. Anyways, before I blabber onwards, it looks like it is going to be a Stargate-based opener right here in game number 2 for MC. I like Stargate openers a lot. Obviously, if you manage to get that Oracle in without your opponent knowing, that helps a lot, but here we go. Fantasy gets that scout in once again. It's one of the reasons why you want to keep that Reaper alive so very badly. You use it for your initial scouting, and then also, even though it dies right here, you also use it to figure out what kind of tech it is that the Protoss player is going for. Not always can you get off that second scout. Actually, there was an Oracle queued up for a little bit, but MC decided to cancel it and go for the Phoenix instead. I quite like that. I mean, Phoenixes can be utilized here. Yeah, he does make more. You can utilize them to pick up like a bunch of SCVs as well, but also Widow Mines and stuff. If you manage to pick them up before they burrow, you can actually prevent them from shooting, even while they're in the middle of their burrow animation. So even going for a bunch of additional Phoenixes is not a bad idea. Plus, you can obviously use them to like patrol left and right or back. I guess it's top to bottom over here, okay? But you can basically patrol them around your main base to prevent yourself really from taking a whole lot of damage. Plus, And I like this kind of stuff a lot. I like Stargate openers in general. Plus, you can use them for scouting. I mean, pretty much everyone uses hallucinated phoenixes, right, from the Sentry for scouting purposes. But phoenixes themselves actually are very fast. And if you control them, you can keep them around for a long time and basically figure out exactly what it is that the opponent is going for. Cybernetics Core follow-up right now, as well as the third base here for, or rather robotics facility follow-up right here for MC, as well as that Nexus. So he's going to be able to continue building up his tech, but also continue building up his economy. Fantasy though, just playing that super standard fantasy-esque style. If you look for a build to copy, you can 100% go ahead and just simply do exactly what Fantasy is doing. For most of the games that you watch him play, he basically gets to play his own game for the first couple minutes. He won't really be taking a whole lot of risks. He's just simply gonna play a very solid, straightforward style. He might go for like some low commitment pushes, like for example that double medevac or the double Widow Mine inside of the medevac push that we saw in the previous game. But he doesn't really go for like a Doom drop at the 4-minute mark or you know, a Stimpak timing attack. He doesn't really do those kind of builds very much. Just simply builds up his own economy and slowly but surely progresses through the ranks. Now, the third Nexus is done though, and this is going to allow MC to get a really quick economy advantage. This is something that the Terran player will have to either like push into or maybe acknowledge by going for their own third command center as well. There we go, that was a good scan. That scan will indeed confirm not the placement of the Nexus, but it will indeed see that there are a bunch of units moving over in that direction, and it's gonna give him a bunch of information as well. Sometimes Protoss players like to hide their tech, like right over here. That scan would have revealed it. Not gonna be the case this time around, but it's nice to know. So in this case, by the way, it is gonna be that robotics bay from MC. It's gonna be Colossus play. Colossus, obviously, they deal bonus damage against light. They're really bad against Marauders. They're not very good against Cyclones either, but they absolutely eat Marines for breakfast, right? Killing those Marines would be the easiest job for the Colossi, especially with extended thermal lens, and especially if there's a bunch of Zealots and maybe a couple of force fields in front as well. You always have to make the decision though, right? What kind of splash damage do I want to get first? If you decide to go for the Colossus tech, it does leave you vulnerable if your opponent decided to go for a couple of Vikings. Marauders sometimes can just simply overwhelm it as well. Colossus is going to be out here in time, and this is well timed here by MC, who will need it really, really badly right here against that Terran push. So here we go. This is a push that is meant to deal a bunch of damage. Obviously, we saw the Terran player, well, he doesn't have... Wait, Stimpak is only just now done? What? No way! That's a massive error right there on the side of Fantasy, who probably didn't want to engage just yet. And now all of a sudden, look at that laser giraffe. Bzz, bzz. Yeah, you can try and target it down. And I guess it will get killed there, but it ended up dealing a ridiculous amount of damage. A little bit of a mistake right there from Fantasy. I was gonna say, why is he splitting without using Stim? Stim was a couple seconds from finishing there, and I guess he walked across the map a little bit too quick. Dude, if that fight was just a little bit different, I think that MC would actually have been in a world of trouble. Because Stimpak does make these units way more microable, so you can split them off against that, or you can split them out, or spread them out, I suppose, against the Colossus splash damage, which is massive. And then obviously you can also utilize them very, very easily when they just simply, I guess, pull the trigger faster. I've never quite been able to understand why a Marine can attack faster while they're like using an automatic rifle and they're literally pulling down the trigger. Maybe it's actually not an automatic rifle. They have to like pull for every single round. Maybe they can reload faster. I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, here we go. Big drop inside of the main base here of Protoss, but there's been enough time right now for a second one of these Colossus, or I guess a third one even, to be produced as well. And even though the Phoenix right there did sacrifice its life, MC manages to stay alive. And I think he should be able to pull ahead right here, economically speaking, or rather, you know, supply-wise here in just a little bit, as he has been progressing really, really nicely in that economy. Third command center, though, was acquired here by Fantasy. He's going to be able to continue mining over there for at least a little while longer. Looks like Fantasy might want to go for like another double-pronged attack. This is what we saw being very successful in game number 1. This is completely unscouted so far here by MC, who's only right now going to see the edge right here of that Terran army. He does need those Stalkers, though, instead of the main base. Those medevacs are waiting for the perfect opportunity to move in. A scan right there does confirm part of the Protoss army, but I think that Fantasy looks at that and realizes, you know what, that's not everything. There's something else hiding. Doesn't matter, though. Still decides to go into the main base regardless. dropping between the buildings. Very, very nice. Colossus do stay at the front. A lot of Stalkers and apparently a Warpin right now is going to be enough, but that robotics facility does get killed. At the same time, though, the Protoss army does decide to move forward as well. Widow Mines obviously can be target fired down really nicely by those Colossi. And even though the Terran army in the main base does get deflected, a couple probes ended up dying there. We did see the kill on the robotics facility as well, and I think all things considered, that's a decent enough engagement right there for Fantasy. He's now also really starting to commit right here to the production of Vikings. So he's got 5 right now. Usually you're looking for about 8 or so if you want to deal with the Colossi effectively. It's 3 Colossi right now for MC. That's quite a lot, actually. Going for the 4th is rather greedy. But obviously, if you go too heavily into Colossus, right? These Vikings are just going to pick them off one at a time. Right? And I think if you notice, hey, wait, there's more than 4 of these Colossi, or more than 3, which is usually the standard. I think that MC will just simply all of a sudden see himself fighting like 12 or so of these Vikings. And they're going to have a really easy time picking up these Colossi. Alright, well apparently this medevac drop is getting a bit of an escort. I don't know if MC saw these units loading up. Well, regardless, he's going to be caught with his pants down. You do see that prismatic alignment right there being utilized. A couple of the pylons will probably end up dying here. Maybe some of the zealots and some of the stalkers, but I don't think this is going to be all too much. Now, beautiful zoning right there by Fantasy. I love that. Look at that. Oh, that's really well done. Almost got himself the kill right there on one of those Colossi. He knew that the Stalkers would blink into the main base to try and pick off as many of these medevacs as possible. And that obviously immediately allowed the Vikings then to zone out those Colossi. Medevac drop though, once again threatening the main base. At the same time, we saw Terran push heading towards the 3rd as well. But MC is holding on and he is deflecting. He's now going for the 2nd source of splash damage. I feel like if you get up to like a decent enough Colossus count and then also mix in like either Disruptors or Psionic Storm, this Protoss army becomes way more terrifying. There we go. I think that Fantasy realizes as well. He's on a bit of a timer. Trying his very best to pick up those Colossi, but there we go. Blink forward. That's going to be the end of most of those Vikings. And once again, the medevacs do load up, but I think this time around it's going to be for the retreat instead. Slowly but surely, right? That Protoss Death Ball is building. Fantasy has been trying his best to contain this from happening. He does finish up +2/+2 in just a couple seconds. Does he have any Ghost out right now? I haven't seen any of them just yet. No, he does have a Ghost Academy. I feel like Marauders and Marines are going to have a very hard time cutting it. Now, the medevacs though, even though I thought they would fly back home, they've decided to move towards, once again, the main base right here of Protoss. MC close to maxing out. He does still have enough right here to warp in at home. Ooh, Prism right there does disappear magically. At the same time though, MC decides to push the natural. He committed a little bit too far across the map, so right now he's like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna have to fight this on his side of the map. Looks like Fantasy, though, has different plans. He just simply wants to pick his opponent's bases apart very, very easily. Zealots, though, absolutely demolishing all of these mineral lines. The natural is already gone. Storm right now landed on so many of these Terra units as well. Stalkers blink forward. They managed to get into the main base at the same time. Oh, once again, massive storms over on the other side of the map. Fantasy, even though I feel like he had a chance right there to clean all of it up, I feel like a couple Terran players probably had to cringe there, because those storms certainly hurt. And there we go. We see, of course, that recall happening before the Nexus dies. The Marauders are going to be picked off as well, or at the very least 2 of them managed to get that hot evac. But even right now, I feel like, oh my god, that's a Terran meat grinder right there. Yeah, even though eventually maybe Fantasy can stabilize, that is already so much damage that's being done. And you know what? I don't really think that's going to happen either. All of the Nexi have been killed, though, so you know what? You know what, actually? MC does still have minerals right now to rebuild a Nexus, but he doesn't have a mining base right now. That's very, very painful. These probes are looking for a home. 63 of those SCVs were killed right now, and actually, we have a bit of a crazy game. I love this. Command centers are floating everywhere. These buildings in the top left-hand corner cannot be reached. Liberators right there available as well to put maybe on the perimeter there if he really needs to. There's, yeah, finally a Nexus that's being rebuilt, but I think this one may very well be killed as well. Most of that Protoss army currently making its way across the map. The Colossi trying to figure out if there's like anywhere that a command center can be hiding. I think that this one, though, will burn down pretty easily. And, well, while the Nexus does get cancelled once again, the command center also falls into pieces. Okay, another Nexus has been acquired. You know what? In the grand scheme of things, Even though MC didn't macro perfectly, I think he's kind of lucky here in the sense that he hasn't really been... like, he missed-macroed for a little bit, and he had like 1,000 resources in the bank. I think for once, that actually works in a player's favor, right? If he wouldn't have had that, this base probably couldn't go up. But instead, right now, he's going to be able to acquire a Nexus right over here, even after being forced to cancel several of them earlier today as well. Fantasy, though, decides to go for another expansion in the bottom left-hand corner. Some of you may be familiar with the Fantasy GG timing. This is not Fantasy misreading the game. This is Fantasy genuinely thinking he's got a really good shot to potentially win this as well. But MC is stabilizing, right? He has a lot of probes still available. And I guess a lot is relative right now. 15 of them. That's a whopping amount, at least compared to the 2. Now, obviously, we do know that there's a, a command center floating on this map somewhere. But I saw a Void Ray coming out, and I think that is going to be the key right here to MC's victory. It's right now patrolling all across the perimeter of this map, and it should find the last of these Terran structures. Well, this is still a little bit awkward though, right? Fantasy has found a bit of an angle. These Metafacts are going to be able to do a lot of mobility here, or at the very least, allow these Marauders to get a lot of mobility. And, well, yeah, eventually, I guess that Fantasy realizes, you know what? Even if I try my very best, I'm not going to be able to do enough damage here. MC's army is bigger, his economy is bigger, and even though I've got the upgrade advantage, it's not going to happen. Game number 2 goes in favor of MC. All right, here we go. Match point on New Repugnancy, spawning here in the top right-hand corner of the map. With the blue probes, we have none other than MC and his opponent in the opposite corner. Playing a very close game in game number 2, we have Fantasy. I can only think back of that moment where his Stimpack just was seconds from finishing, right? I mean, there's this thing that I advise pretty much everyone who first starts playing StarCraft and who is actively improving in the game, or at the very least trying to get better. I always hammer on timing attacks. One of the most common things that I see when I'm coaching people, especially below Platinum League, is lack of a plan. First off, players just sort of make whatever, and then also lack of attacking in general. So usually, both of those issues are solved by going for a timing attack. Because first off, it will give you a plan to execute in every single game, which I think is crucial. But then secondly, it will also allow you to, at the very least, attack at certain moments in the game, right? And usually, you want to attack right when upgrades finish. Now, Fantasy had it all lined up for him, right? He had +1 infantry weapons done. I think he also finished up Combat Shield, although I'm not entirely sure. And he also did need Stimpack. Now, Stimpack was seconds from finishing. He wanted to hit his opponent in the face right when the upgrade was done. Instead, he found himself fighting one of those laser giraffes without the upgrade. That's rough. That is really rough. Not really what you want to have happen. Sometimes, though, that is the kind of issue that you do run into, and I guess he made the best of the scenario. If that didn't happen, though, right? I feel like that fight would have been won. The Colossi obviously was picked off, but after that, I think the Stalkers would have died as well. Maybe a couple probes at the third, and then all of the pushes that came after that, the drops inside of the main base, and then the pushes towards the third, those would have all hit just a little bit harder. So just a couple more kills here and there. It would have really, I feel like, allowed that tempo advantage to go in favor of Fantasy, and it probably could have prevented that Protoss Death Ball from ever forming. Instead, though, we find ourselves right here on New Repugnancy, and let's figure out what these players are gonna go for. One probe, still being a little bit cheeky. Second pylon did go up in the main base, so at the very least it's not gonna be a super aggressive push. Ooh, he does want to put down a pylon. Okay, I was gonna say, maybe he wants to proxy something. Now, this is awkward, right? If you want to go for Dark Templar play, like for example what we saw in game number 1, you kind of need to put the Twilight Council down right now. Instead, you're not going to be able to really, get anything down. And it's, like, going to delay everything. So maybe this is going to deny scouting, but sometimes it just makes the counter easier. Because if you don't know what's going on, oftentimes we'll see Terran players just simply blindly preparing for any kind of potential aggression. We'll see what he decides to proxy here. So it is going to be a Twilight Council. Okay. So the only reason why you would want to proxy a Twilight Council, I feel like, would be because you want to go ahead and build Dark Templar, right? Fantasy once again trying to get it into the main base right here of Protoss. One Stalker sleeping on the job. These Reapers have provided a lot of value so far. I think it might try and once again loop around and maybe get into the main base, and it will see the lack of tech. It's gonna be a big deal. Twilight Council will finish here in just a little bit. Fantasy going for that starport right here. If he once again decides to go for the safety Raven, I feel like he's gonna be in a great spot. It is gonna be Blink. Okay, I was gonna say, like, going for Dark Templar here, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Which is the one thing that you do see proxied quite regularly. This time around, it's gonna be Blink. Now, the probe, or rather that Reaper, it did manage to get a pretty good scout, right? It saw the natural, the entirety of it. It saw the locations of the pylon inside of the main base. And it saw the lack of a potential third pylon. If you know that there's no tech structure attached to a third, or to one of those pylons and you don't see the third, you know that something is probably not quite right. So Fantasy is scouting all over the place right now. He will eventually arrive over there, but that is gonna be at the absolute latest possible time. Fantasy, you're gonna have to make a bunch of defensive units. You'll need to be extremely cautious here. He knows that it's not gonna be a Stargate at this point. Stargates, generally speaking, produce an Oracle around that 4-minute mark. So that's why we see the Marines and then also that one Widow Mine inside of the main. Right now, though, Widow Mine already put into that medevac, so that is going to allow it to, at the very least, still be a little bit useful. Eventually, the Marine right here will figure out exactly what's going on, but that's also around the time that Blink is finished. Dude, no way! That is so unfortunate! Did the Reaper also actually... Yeah, no, the Reaper also actually retired from that. So, Fantasy is scouting basically everywhere. He saw one pylon over here, whoop-de-doo, and I guess that may have very well allowed this, this one Marine to go back as well. That is unfortunate! That is really unfortunate right here. We do see now a Raven being produced. Ravens are really good, obviously, at just defending whatever. Siege tank going up in the main base. I think that Fantasy is going to have to fight a bunch of Blink Stalker that are going to head into the main, though. Right? I think he's going to bypass the natural altogether. So this bunker over here is nice. Yeah, okay. Repositioning the Marines to the main is clever. I like that decision a lot. I also quite like the decision right here from Fantasy to not actually go after that pylon. He does now see a couple of additional Stalkers, and I think that is probably going to be all the information he really needs. One Blink right there being utilized. Widow Mine dropped, by the way. I missed it, but 5 kills right there by one of those Widow Mines. Here we go. Hallucinated Phoenix is going to provide the high ground vision that he needs, and he is going to be able to get into the main base. Now, denying an upgrade here is a big deal. This upgrade is still a little while from finishing, but that is a scary amount of Protoss already. Only 33 probes have been produced, and this is the thing that MC won tournaments with, okay? Essentially blindsiding his opponent, fooling them into thinking they are safe to go into full economy, and then hitting them when they have just invested into a little bit too many workers. Oh, man. That positioning right here is really solid as well, right? Essentially now denying the mining inside of the main base. This is awkward because even though probes right now are not in that big of a number... Oh, well, I say that. Once again, a bunch of them do get killed. The mining is probably in favor still, though, for MC. A lot more units have been worked in as well. We don't see charge, so there's no charge available. Blink Stalker right there, moving forward, going after the siege tank. One siege tank is gone. Easily the scariest unit right here. At the same time, we see once again that second group of Stalkers also moving forward, going after both the bunker and then also the siege tank. MC trying to essentially sandwich these units right now. Now, where is it? There we go. Okay, I was gonna say, that upgrade there was denied. So we did see a kill right there on one of the tech labs, which means that Stimpack is not gonna be done from Fantasy for at least not a little while. A lot of those SCVs are picked off as well. Bunker inside of the main base, though, this time acquired. That's going to be repaired quite easily right here by most of these leftover SCVs as well. But I love this double-pronged harass. He's microing on 2 different locations at once, and MC is trying to make the most out of a very micro-heavy army. Once again, blinking those weakened Stalkers towards the back. Zealots make their way towards that natural mineral line as well. Stimpack, though, about halfway done right now. Siege tank coming out once again, and it's going to be able to shell away at quite a bit of a distance. Medevac on the other side of the map still providing at least a little bit of counter pressure, but MC seems to be overwhelming his opponent here one moment at a time. Once again, that Zealot providing the high ground vision that he needs. Both the Raven and then also the Siege tank get picked off, and I think slowly but surely the Stalker sandwich is working out in favor. Fantasy posts a little bit of a cry emoji right there. MC also equally crying tears of joy. I think that this is indeed going to be enough for the South Korean Protoss player who left the StarCraft 2 scene a couple years ago, but is now back in full force. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below, and if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're new here, make sure to hit the bell icon as well so you get notifications as soon as I upload more. But other than that, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright, and I'll see you once again in the next one.